Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Have you ever had a build idea in Path of Exile 2 and you've been thinking, I wonder whether anyone else has had this idea? And if so, I wonder how they implemented it. Well, one of the most useful player-run resources from Path of Exile 1, a website called POE.ninja, has now migrated over to POE2 as well. POE2.ninja is a website that provides a whole bunch of information on builds, and it's likely to include more information in the future. Of all the third-party resources that exist in Path of Exile 1, POE.ninja is probably the second most frequently used, behind only Path of Building. To give you a bit of a sense as to what it does in POE1, there are two main things that it does. The first one is aggregate a whole bunch of information about the Trade League economy. Now, Path of Exile 1 has a lot more items than Path of Exile 2, but you can get a bit of a sense as to what the going values are of a whole bunch of different items. For instance, fun fact, the current trade rate of a Mirror of Kalandra is approximately 131,100 Chaos Orbs. Chaos Orbs being the general currency of smaller trades over in Path of Exile 1 land. Or alternately, you might be interested in a more familiar one, such as the Divine Orb. Well, the Divine Orb exists in Path of Exile 1, and it currently trades for 171.4 Chaos Orbs over in that game. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things here because Path of Exile 1 has been out for more than 10 years, and as a result, there's a lot of different crafting mechanisms that have crept into the game over a long period of time, and some of which will be more familiar to PoE2 players like the Exalted Orb and the Orb of Annulment, and some of which will seem completely bizarre, such as the Tainted Orb of Fusing. But lots of these exist in Path of Exile 1 land. However, the other thing that POE.ninja does, as well as provide an economy overview, which is not yet implemented for POE2, is provide an overview of popular builds. And in many ways, this is the most important thing that it does for the Path of Exile 1 community. Let's say that you're not very familiar with Path of Exile 1, but you know the basics. You've decided you want to play a Trickster, you want to use the unique sword Ephemeral Edge. Well, you can have a look at what everyone who is playing a Trickster and who is using the unique sword Ephemeral Edge is doing by just simply drilling down and then looking at all of the players who have their character registered on this website, finding out what are some of the other decisions that they're making. For instance, what skills are they using? Well, 39% of them are using Lightning Strike, 33% Val Lightning Strike, 30% are using Splitting Steel, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones down below. How are they implementing damage? Mostly by direct attacks, sometimes with traps and mines, but those are pretty rare. What passives are they using? Absolutely everyone is using Chaos Inoculation and Escape Artist. Now, if you're only a Path of Exile 2 player, a whole bunch of the details of this will not make any sense to you, but the fact that you can draw these correlations is really significant. And additionally, you can have a look at what's called the passive heat map, and then you can get a sense as to exactly how they've structured their passive tree, which is something that will be more familiar to Path of Exile 2 players, with colors that are closer to red in the spectrum indicating that that is more frequently taken, and colors that are closer to green or blue being things that are less frequently taken. Or you can have a look at the way they've set up their atlas. Now, the atlas is much more complex in PoE1, but this can give you a bit of a sense as to what sort of content these players are focusing on. Now, POE.ninja gets this data from two particular sources. The first one is the API that's available in Path of Exile 1. Every character, if you have their name and they have not actively opted out of being able to be tracked, then you can have a look at the character decisions that they've made, the gear they've got equipped, and a whole bunch of other information. So that's the first piece of information. The second piece of information that's critical is the ladder. In Path of Exile 1, that's the top 15,000 players by XP at any given time. That's something that POE.ninja can scrape and can then run that against that API and get all this information about those 15,000 players. POE2 has much less of this information available, and that's why POE2.ninja has taken a bit of a time to come online. The good news is that POE2.ninja has this build section, and you can firstly start by choosing which of the different leagues you're interested in. They have more information actually on solo self-found, which is interesting, than they do on standard, more on standard than they do on hardcore SSF, and more on hardcore SSF than they do on hardcore. But let's just take a look at the base game without any additional difficulty mods added. So let's jump into standard, and then you'll see a very familiar looking site because it's very similar to what was existing in Path of Exile 1. Here you will see the 12 different ascendancies, plus there's one absolute legend. Can we hear it for them down in the comments below? There's one legend with a Japanese name who has taken a character to level 98 without doing the Trials of Ascendancy. They are playing a warrior in standard in Path of Exile 2. If you're interested in finding out more about these characters though, what you can do is firstly drill down by looking for particular items that you think are either things that you can definitely get your hands on or things you can't. So let's assume that you believe you absolutely positively cannot get your hands on Temporalis. So we're going to drill down by selecting body armor in items, then to Temporalis, and then we're going to click it. Firstly, this is going to show only those characters who are equipping Temporalis. But then, when we click this circle with a line through it, we end up excluding all the characters that are using Temporalis. So you know you can't afford this item, you're not interested in any builds that use it. After this, we're going to say, well, I can't afford Astramentus either. Okay, let's exclude everyone that is using Astramentus. And we do the same thing. After that, let's say you are absolutely fascinated with building around the unique amulet Fireflower. Maybe you have an extremely good one. Maybe you've Krangle Divined one that's got +6 to the level of all fire skills. Well, in that case, maybe you want to click on Fireflower, and then this will show only those characters who are not equipping Temporalis, not equipping Astramentus, but are equipping Fireflower. And then once you've done that, you can have a look and see a whole bunch of statistics at a glance. Okay, 87% of these are playing Infernalists, 6% are playing Stormweavers, 6% are playing Gemling Legionnaires, and absolutely no other ascendancies are recognised. After that, you can look and see what skills they're typically using. Pain Offering is very common. Summon Infernal Hound, which is part of the Infernalist ascendancy, that's very common. Skeletal Sniper, Raging Spirits. Lots more that you can look at there. And then once you do pick one, let's say that you look at Flame Wall, you can then drill down a little bit more and see what those people who are using Flame Wall are doing. And you can also look at what people are linking to their Flame Wall. So some number of people, lots of them are using Fortress Support, which turns it into a circle instead. Arcane Tempo for cast speed. Brutality, which causes it to be unable to deal non-physical damage, which is an interesting one. Mobility Support, which allows you to be more flexible while casting this thing. Arcane Surge, if you're going to spend a lot of mana on something, then you may as well get a lot of that Mac. And then so on and so forth. You can see how people have set up their Flame Wall here. After that, you can also have a look at all of the other things that people are doing down here. Are they triggering it, or are they using it as a normal skill? And also, what passives are being used on these builds? What are some of the other skills that are being used frequently alongside Flame Wall? What are people anointing on their amulets if they're using this setup? And a whole bunch of other information. On top of that, you can also have a look at the passive tree heat map again, just like you can in Path of Exile 1. You can then go and say, all right, people who are using Flame Wall and who have got high level characters, this is what the texture of their passive tree typically looks like. This is not something you copy yourself. This is something that gives you inspiration when you're designing your own build. On top of that, if you want to dig really deep, you can look at a whole bunch of other statistics on the character. Maybe you want to see their movement speed as well. And then once you click movement speed there, you can then see their movement speed, and then you can perhaps sort them. Okay, let's have a look at these characters from highest movement speed down to lowest, or from lowest down to highest, and get a whole bunch of extra information there. Maybe we're only interested in considering those characters who've got pretty high movement speed. And note one thing that's interesting here is that the limits that are present do not appear to be limits that take into account all of the rest of the configuration you've got set up. So why don't we do another quick experiment here? Let's say that you are dead set, no matter what, you are going to be playing an Acolyte of Chayula on your next character. You're absolutely sorted. That is going to be what you do for certain. So firstly, we go through and we check all of the things that we've currently lit up, and then we're going to remove them all. So we want to have no conditions. At that point, we're going to look at the Acolytes of Chayula that exist, and then we can see, all right, what items are they equipping? Well, of the 26 characters that are playing Acolyte of Chayula that are listed in Index by POE.ninja, all of them are using rare boots, all of them are using at least one rare ring, and almost all of them are using Ingenuity. But also on top of that, you'll notice that almost everyone is using Hand of Wisdom in action. So if they're using the Esh Gloves, that should indicate to you that they're going to be playing a character that is stacking attributes, and that these characters at least aspire to acquiring an Astramentus, even if they don't currently own it. On top of that, there's a whole bunch of other things here that might be interesting. In particular, Melting Maelstrom is being used by almost everyone that's playing the Acolyte of Chayula. This is an interesting unique item. There's one that I believe drops from the Simulacrum. It's the rarest of the Simulacrum difficulty 0 items, and it is something that is very much a chase item. It's a very powerful item indeed, and it will give you a bit of a sense as to how you might want to build your Acolyte of Chayula. You want to build a character that can use Hand of Wisdom in action and Melting Maelstrom well together. and that will be your starting point. After that, you can then have a look down for more information. You'll see 35% of these people have got Astromentus. Very expensive item, so you may not be able to afford it. And then a lot of people are using Atziri's Disdain as their helmet as well. This can provide you a whole lot of information, but what's it based upon? Well, Grinding Gear Games published the ladder. The ladder is a list of the top 1,000 characters in each game mode by XP. This is all that's available at the moment. It's just a list of their character names, their class, their current XP level, and their current exact amount of XP. However, they're currently in the process of building an API, and that API will allow you to query much more information about these characters. Then, once this comes out in full, you'll be able to see far more information about each of them. For example, here we've got Jumpin' Jack Flash. You can see here that this character is using this particular crossbow, which is quite a nice one. 7 level of all projectile skills, a bunch of extra physical damage, and then a bunch of mods that are solid, but that aren't quite as special as those ones. It's also got 2 sockets on it that are filled with iron runes. Then the character is using Atziri's Disdain. They're using Temporalis, and their Temporalis has 2 rarity soul cores socketed in it. They've got breach rings in both of their ring slots, and they've got this generic good stuff amulet, and of course, Hand of Wisdom in action, just like pretty much everyone is using during Open Beta 0.1.0. This has a Storm Rune in it, which is something that provides them a little bit of lightning resistance they presumably need. Then there's a set of boots that are pretty good. They have a 21% lightning resistance corruption on them, and on top of that, they also have socketed 7% chaos resistance. And of course, the belt is Ingenuity, because Ingenuity is the best belt in the game. And in case you're interested, you can also see what charms they're using, what flask they're using in both their slots. Of course, Melting Maelstrom being one of the things they're doing, and then all of their jewels. So how would you find this information out without POE.ninja? Well, Grinding Gear Games are working on an API. Their API is currently in a test-ready state at the moment, and because POE.ninja have worked with them for a long period of time, POE.ninja have early access to that API. This is going to be something that'll be available to more people later, but for the moment, the API information is not yet publicly available. So you'll be able to see these characters that have been on the ladder either currently or that have historically been on the ladder on POE2.ninja, but you won't be able to find them just by going to the POE website. In the future, I expect you will be able to simply go to the POE2 website and have a look through the ladder, find a character that interests you, and then look deeper into them. But the fact that POE2.ninja's builds page is allowing you to really quickly drill down and look for the things that you're genuinely interested in, while simultaneously excluding both builds that you know you can't afford, or builds that feel like they've got too much setup for you to afford, or builds that just don't interest you. That is something that makes this into a really, really useful tool for anyone that's interested in either making their own build, but firstly looking at what other people have done, or particularly people that are looking for other successful builds that they use as a starting point to tinker. That's all I got on this. May your Varlorbs have interesting results.